According to the book of Genesis, God created Adam and Eve. Following this, the first two humans born naturally into the world were their sons, Cain and Abel. Despite both being brothers and the first people born of this world, the two hated each other with so much passion that it ended with Cain murdering Abel. That didn't really bode well for how the rest of human history was going to play out. Whether or not that story is true is completely irrelevant. It's not though, is it? It's not how it works. The point is that even 2,500 years ago, when Genesis was written, people recognized that humans have been killing each other for as long as we have existed. This has yet to change, and there's no reason to believe that it ever will. The only thing that has changed is the weaponry used and its deadly efficiency. We've come a long way from the days when we had to defend ourselves using a board with a nail in it, but modern firearms still leave a lot to be desired. Sure, even the most basic pistol can be extremely deadly, but it could always be deadlier, couldn't it? You could always kill someone twice. No, really though, the fastest bullets only travel 3,000 kilometers an hour, and people have this horrible tendency of surviving bullet wounds like idiots. So look, how long do we have to wait until we can shoot each other at the speed of light with 100% lethality rates? Just how soon is it until we could finally be killing each other with Star Trek's phasers and live out all of our murderous dreams? Technobabble and you. Phasers are one of the most interesting pieces of Star Trek technology, thanks to the various and sometimes inconsistent ways that they have been portrayed. The canonical workings of a phaser have changed over time as the writer's understanding of science has increased, but the general principle has remained the same. Basically, phasers fire a beam of highly energetic and also fictitious particles called nadions through a magic crystal ball that's named after an anime. In terms of these weapons becoming a reality, not off to a brill start, are we? Phaser is canonically an acronym for Phased Energy Rectification, which refers to the original process they envisioned for how this might work. A phaser would store energy in the form of plasma in a superconducting chamber, and upon firing, this plasma would be sent through the crystal and emitted impulses of either electromagnetic energy or plasma particles. While being stored, the nadions would also be stripped of the strong nuclear force, which is also not a thing that exists. Maybe this all sounds like nonsense gibberish because we're over 200 years away from when Star Trek predicted phasers would be invented, so our small brains just can't comprehend what future science would look like centuries from now, because that's what technobabble is. Rather than focusing on how little sense the show's explanation of the weapons makes, let's instead focus on the actual purpose of a phaser, which is actually versatility. So look, if you're thinking that the purpose of a phaser is just straight up murder, you'd be incorrect. Most civilizations in Star Trek didn't bother with phaser technology, instead opting to develop disruptors. They are described as working in a similar fashion, but disruptors are far more powerful and they are deadly. Were the only intention to kill people, then phasers would not have been the goal here. That said, they are absolutely capable of killing people. One might even argue that they are more capable than's really necessary. A standard handheld phaser operates at about 5 to 10 megajoules of energy at its target. Since that number is probably totally meaningless to you, a good comparison is that an explosion from 1 kilogram of TNT is just over 4 megajoules. That is an absolutely ludicrous amounts of power for a gun with effectively infinite ammo, and it's pretty severe overkill for taking out another human. But the key to the appeal of phasers comes from the variable settings. Phasers can have their power level decreased so that they merely knock a person unconscious rather than kill them. This particular use is unlikely, at least as it's described by Star Trek. A phaser set to stun supposedly uses its energy to temporarily disable a person's nervous system, painlessly rendering them unconscious for a limited period of time. It seems extremely unrealistic that an energy weapon could do something like this without causing serious or permanent damage, but let's just go ahead and pretend that it can. More importantly, the variable power setting allows the phaser to be used not only as a weapon, but also as a sort of Swiss Army gun or sonic screwdriver. Not only is the power output variable, but the beam can be configured to have a larger area of effect rather than focusing all of its output on a single point. Phasers have been depicted as being used as welding tools to heat up rocks for warmth, to boil liquid, or as a blowtorch to cut through doors. In a pinch, the phaser can even be set to overload, turning it into an extraordinarily powerful bomb. Phasers were scalable as well. There were the handheld phasers, phasers, but starships were also equipped with phaser banks. These had a similar level of versatility, at least in theory. These larger phasers drew power directly from the warp core to amp up their power output. In addition to space combat, they were also being used to destroy asteroids, destroy entire cities, or on one occasion, even stunning an entire city block of people. It was said that a ship's phasers could destroy an entire continent on a planet, though we don't believe this was ever put to the test on the show. It's stupid. Prime Directive. Admittedly, that's all pretty cool. Having a gun that could do all of those different things, in addition to having a setting that straight up vaporizes people, seems like it could be extremely useful to have. So look, even if we're confined to only using particles that actually exist for our phasers, could something like this be possible? Directed energy weapons. If Star Trek is to be believed, we are well on our way to phaser technology. As we said, phasers weren't invented in the show's timeline until the 23rd century, but the precursors to these weapons were laser rifles. These all fall under the umbrella of directed energy weapons, which also includes weapons like microwave sound beams or Archimedes' fabled death ray. Laser weapons have been in development for decades, and for the most part, this is still the case. However, we can expect this to change very, very soon, actually. Earlier this year, 2022, Israel unveiled its Iron Beam defense system, a 100 kilowatt laser that has been very successful at shooting down drones and missiles in tests. If you'd like to know more about the Iron Beam, then you can absolutely check out the video on the Mega Projects channel. The short version is that it's a big cool laser that can blow shit out of the air at the speed of light. Pretty awesome. However, despite all of their successful tests and the desire to publicly unveil the new system, Israel believes it is still 2 to 3 years before the Iron Beam defense system is fully online. That's still really soon in the grand scheme of things, and Israel isn't the only country working on laser weapons. Many countries, including of course the United States, are actively developing these sorts of weapons. Turkey and Iran both claim to have them in active service already, though those reports are unsubstantiated. It is currently believed that the US Army will be prepared to roll out laser weapons in 2023, but these are not handheld lasers. While they will be attached to vehicles, thus making the weapons mobile, they are still not as cool as a portable handheld weapon. Even so, having any viable laser weapons is still a major step towards making all of this a reality. It's hard to say how long the jump from larger vehicle-mounted weapons to laser rifles is going to take, but it's probably not going to actually be that long. The US military is hard at work developing prototypes that they hope will be able to deploy within the next few years. And according to China's military, they already have functioning laser rifles. China says that their weapons are capable of shooting through glass and lighting a person on fire from, wait for it, half a mile away. But China also says a lot of things. While these lasers are designed to either kill people or disable drones and missiles, they don't actually have to be. There is a class of directed energy weapons known as dazzlers that seek to only temporarily blind or disorient their targets. It's not quite as impressive as knocking out someone's nervous system, but it's also, not fiction. Dazzlers don't technically violate the UN protocol on blinding laser weapons, as the effects are only temporary, and the US Air Force revealed their first prototype dazzler in 2005. The project was eventually terminated over concerns that the blinding effects may not be as temporary as hoped and would thus violate the UN protocol, but if nothing else, this prototype served as a reminder of why the United States military is first in the world in cool acronyms. The Air Force's Personnel Halting and Stimulation Response Rifle, or phaser rifle, clever, demonstrated the laser weapons don't necessarily need to be lethal. It's quite possible that in the future the military will be able to set their phasers to stun. Of course, we have neither dazzlers nor lethal laser rifles in use yet, but there's no reason to believe that once both technologies are perfected, that they could not be housed within the same firearm. There's plenty of reason to believe that it's not a great idea and could lead to a lot of accidental deaths, but there's no reason to believe that it wouldn't be possible. It may not be exactly like the phasers that Star Trek promised us, but a laser weapon with both a stun and kill setting would be really close, even if you couldn't use it to heat up some Earl Grey. Directed energy weapons have been cited as the US military's highest priority, and they aren't alone. Militaries around the world want to make these firearms a reality, and with good reason. Bullets have proven effective at killing people for hundreds of years, but in many ways, laser weapons would be a pretty big improvement. Lasers travel at the speed of light, which would be the case for these directed energy weapons as well. They also aren't subject to things like gravity and wind. This means that these firearms would be far more accurate at taking out their targets. There's also no need to bluff your way through a potentially dangerous situation. game like Dirty Harry, it doesn't matter whether you fired 5 shots or 6, as laser rifles would have effectively unlimited ammo as long as they had a supply of electricity. Another huge advantage is that, unlike their depiction in movies and video games, energy weapons don't actually go pew pew. Shots fired from a laser rifle would be totally silent, and depending on the wavelength of light used, it also would be completely invisible. That makes them perfect for snipers or any stealth operators, as pinpointing the location of the attacker could prove to be prohibitively difficult. In addition to the operational and logistical advantages, there's also the matter of cost. Obviously, decades of R&D is expensive, but depending on how exactly the directed energy weapons function, there is a strong possibility that they will be less expensive in the long term. This is certainly the case for larger mounted firearms. For example, a traditional anti-ballistic missile costs roughly $100,000. That gets really expensive really quick, especially when repeatedly shooting down inexpensive drones out of the sky. On the other hand, Israel's Iron Beam only costs about $3.50 per shot, making its ammo effectively free by comparison. Should we want phasers? So, we know laser weapons are not only possible, but are likely to arrive in the next few years. It's even possible that a laser rifle could be designed to include both stun and kill settings. Is that good enough? Or should we want to make the next leap to the more deadly omni-tool that is the phaser? Well, probably not. It's unlikely that we would need anything more deadly than the directed energy weapons already in development, and the design of the phaser is simply too unrealistic. The Iron Beam uses a 100 kilowatt laser, and Lockheed just delivered the world's most powerful laser weapon to the US Army with an output of 300 kilowatts. These are large-scale weapons that can shoot planes out of the sky, and even the 300 kilowatt laser is 10% the output of a phaser. That sort of firepower is completely unnecessary, and the phaser's alleged capabilities only get more out of hand. Phasers not only have the ability to stun or kill people, but they can also vaporize them. Although this is depicted as just making a person or object vanish using 1960s TV magic, they have consistently used the word vaporize without attempting to retcon it, so we will assume that phasers are intended to perform this very real task. Vaporizing something means to turn it from a solid or liquid into a gas. This can often have a fairly explosive consequence, as gas is much less dense than liquid and thus takes up more space. If you've ever tried to put out a grease fire with water, you've witnessed these consequences firsthand. The grease fire burns with enough energy to vaporize the water, resulting in it expanding as it turns to steam. This rapid expansion causes the fire to spread, and, well, it's a bad time all around. You probably never thought about the actual rate of expansion, but when water turns to vapor, it takes up 1,600 times the volume that the water did. Seeing as the human body is about 60% water, a phaser's ability to vaporize someone would be both gross and dangerous. If shot with a phaser set to vaporize, the water in a person's body would instantly turn to steam and expand to fill 1,600 times the space that it occupied previously. The water in an average person would suddenly expand with explosive force to the size of 50 cubic meters, roughly the same size of an average master bedroom. If that happened on a ship, the sudden increase in atmospheric pressure could potentially blow a hole right through the ship. The force could also easily knock out the person firing the weapon, or worse. Even if none of that happened, you'd still be left breathing in people mist while little fleshy chunks rain down on you. This is far from the only reason we probably don't need phasers, as there are a litany of safety concerns and design impossibilities associated with them. But it is definitely the most disgusting reason. In reality, laser weapons will almost certainly be good enough for killing people in the next several hundred years, so there's no real need to look into more complicated technology. We just hope that once laser rifles leave military development and become commercially available, that the consumer models come equipped with the expected pew pew sound effect. Thanks for watching.